The first domino piece has fallen. Erik Haula was traded to the Predators in exchange for Jeremy Hanzel and a fourth round selection in this year's draft. Emma Lingan from Locked On Predators and also the Hockey News join me on today's episode to help break down the trade. So much to discuss on today's episode alongside Emma. Buckle up, everybody.
You're Locked On Devils, your daily podcast on the New Jersey Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, this is Bryce Salvador, and you're Locked On Devils with Trey Matthews.
Scores! Oh, Steven stepped up, nailed it. Brodor's got the puck. What a shot. The Devils win the Stanley Cup.
Alrighty now, what is up, New Jersey? Welcome back to the Locked On Devils podcast here at the Locked On Network. I'm your host, college hockey play announcer, Devils Writer Pucks Pitchforks, and also part-time credential media member, Trey Matthews. Like I said, the first domino piece has fallen. Erik Haula has reunited with the Predators and also his former Golden Knights teammate, Jonathan Marchessault. His tenure with the Devils, no more. I will bring in Emma Lingan from Locked On Predators and the Hockey News in a second, but first, a quick update. I had no intent of recording this type of episode because this trade took place in the evening. I had something originally scheduled, but obviously this trade takes priority. So the episode I originally had scheduled will now be posted at a later date. All right, update over. Without further ado, let's talk to Emma Lingan from Locked On Predators and the Hockey News. Take it away. I am joined alongside my colleague over at Locked On Predators, Emma Lingan. She is also a credentialed media member for the Predators, covering them for the Hockey News as well. She also knows Christy Flannery, friend of the show. Emma, I didn't really have much prepared because, to say the least, because this happened out of nowhere, and we basically just got together. Erik Haula reunited with Nashville. Devils salary dump. First and foremost, how you doing?
I'm good. I was not expecting this on a Wednesday afternoon, but here we are, just getting right into it with the offseason action.
Absolutely. So let's just break it down. On Wednesday evening, it was announced that the Devils sent Erik Haula to the Predators in exchange for Jeremy Hanzel and also a fourth round pick in this year's NHL draft. Emma, let's start with you. What are your initial thoughts on the move?
Don't love it, to be honest, from a Nashville perspective. I honestly, I don't think that it makes the Predators worse in the long run by any means. Of course, Haula is only signed through the end of this year or this coming year. And, Hanzel is a ECHL defenseman, didn't really have a clear path to the NHL with Nashville. And then the fourth round pick, that's not a huge loss, I don't think, for Nashville, but I guess more puzzled than anything by it. Of course, Nashville needs more depth down the middle. I mean, what team doesn't? But I think that what they really need is more scoring down the middle. They also need more youth. And Haula, while he does a lot of things really well, he's not a volume scorer. And he's 34 years old. So, if you're looking for guys who can take faceoffs and kill penalties, I mean, you kind of have that already in Nashville. You've got Colton Sissons and Michael McCarron. Again, both guys who are entering the last year of their contracts as well. So I'm just not sure it adds a ton of value for Nashville. But it also doesn't really take away, I would say, in the long run from anything.
So this is like bittersweet for me because of all the players I've interviewed, I always say that Erik Haula is one of my favorite people to interact with. Yes, he could get a little snippy at times. If the Devils are on a losing streak, chances are he's not in the best of moods. But as a former athlete, I totally get it, which is sometimes if the team is struggling, the last thing you want to do is talk to the media, especially 5 minutes after a game. But he understands it. He'll just tell it how it is. Here's the thing about Haula. He didn't really have the best of performances this season. And I don't know if this is going to alleviate the concern you have this season for the Devils. He appeared in 69 games. Keep in mind, he was sidelined for a month due to an ankle injury. He had 11 goals, 9th on the team, 10 assists, 13th on the team, 21 points, 11th on the team. He had 5 power play points. He won 378 faceoffs, 2nd on the team, which gave him a faceoff win percentage of 52.6%. He blocked 35 shots, 12th on the team. He had 101 hits, 9th on the team. He also represented Team Finland during 4 Nations. Yeah, Haula, the thing is, we've been talking about Haula potentially being on the chopping block for the Devils for the past few months or so. But the problem was during the season, he had a no trade clause, like full blown no trade clause the past couple of seasons. Now this is shifted to a modified no trade clause, 6 teams that he cannot be dealt to without his permission. I'm going to assume, this is just an educated guess, the Hurricanes were one of those teams on the list because I don't think he liked the Hurricanes organization. But Haula is a guy that definitely takes a lot of faceoffs. His scoring can be very inconsistent. He is getting up there in age. He does do the dirty work. His job is to try to take the pressure off of some of the more bona fide scorers on the team. So, for example, Lindy Ruff, when he was still the head coach for the Devils, he said the reason why Erik Haula was never a healthy scratch despite his struggles was because he wins a lot of faceoffs, thus giving the Devils possession, which took some of the pressure off of Jack Hughes' shoulders. Now, I do need to mention this. From November 25th to March 9th, you want to know how many points Haula had during that span?
Tell me.
0. 0.
Great.
Yeah, so from November 25th to March 9th, keep in mind, he did miss a month during that span due to injury. So he was just in a complete funk. But to his credit, he did elevate his game to close out the season. So from March 9th to April 16th, he had 6 goals, 4 assists for a grand total of 10 points and a plus-minus rating of +6, which was big because the Devils needed him going into the playoffs. But yeah, it was time to move on from Erik Haula because Tom Fitzgerald said that he wasn't going to run it back with the same group this past season, just wasn't good enough. And Erik Haula, whether it was fair or not, was going to be one of the players on the chopping block, just in large due to his performance. And also Luke Hughes needs a new contract. The Devils only have $12 million in cap available. Now, after the Haula deal, the Devils have about $14.4 million in cap. It's a start. And there's a lot of work to be done. Andre Palat, he's got to be sweating bullets. Dawson Mercer, his seat might be feeling a little warm. Dougie Hamilton, that's a dark horse, but Erik Haula was the first domino piece to fall a day after the Panthers were named back-to-back champions.
Yeah, I think it's for Nashville, at least from that side of things. I think with the salary piece, I think again, Erik Haula, 3.1 million. It's not huge, not gonna really break the bank, I think. But in terms of what he does, again, I think he is a solid veteran bottom 6 guy. And I think from Nashville's perspective, they have a team full of veteran bottom 6 guys. I mean, I mentioned Sissons, they have McCarron, they have Ryan O'Reilly has been playing as their 1C. He's really probably more suited to be a 2C, but they don't have anyone else to really be that 1C. And as I mentioned before, they tried to address in the offseason, they tried to address the lack of scoring by getting Jonathan Marchessault and Steven Stamkos. And obviously they finished as one of the worst scoring teams in the league last year. So that on paper really doesn't make a ton of sense. But I think that, with Haula coming in, it's just kind of giving Nashville more of what they already have. You mentioned Dawson Mercer. I mean, that's a guy I know that Predators fans have been salivating over for the longest time, especially when the rumors came out that, Tom Fitzgerald had been asking about Ryan O'Reilly, and then Nashville wanted Dawson Mercer as part of the return. And while that might be a little bit of wishful thinking, I think that's more, the youth and the speed and the skill that he brings is more of what Nashville needs, whereas Haula is just kind of more of what they already have.
Before we continue with today's episode alongside Emma, let me tell you guys about Wonderful Pistachios. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller all day long. Personally, I love the no shells variety. It's perfect grab and go snack for busy days. Whether I'm snacking at my desk, on the road, or just need a quick protein boost, they're always my go-to. I'm in and out of airports, constantly traveling, so I love having a snack by my side. Get snacking and get cracking with a snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. Okay, let's get back to today's discussion alongside Emma. Take it away once again. I got to ask you this, just 2 questions. Let's go a little off course here. You talked about Ryan O'Reilly. I had a source tell me that potentially the Devils finished, quote unquote, second for Ryan O'Reilly, but he stayed put. So I'm just like, okay, who finished first? Because he remained in Nashville. And I guess this person told me like, oh, well, that's the thing. The first place was Nashville because he just stayed put. How true was that, like, that Ryan O'Reilly could have made his way to New Jersey during the deadline? Because what I was hearing, the front office for Nashville was demanding not only Dawson Mercer, but also Shimo Nemitz. And I'm just like, that's pushing it just a little bit just because O'Reilly's getting up there in age. Bona fide scorer, don't get me wrong. Devils need more depth, but don't gut yourself here. That's not a good investment.
Yeah, I do think that was wise of the Devils to not make that trade because that would have been gutting their depth quite a bit. I do think that Ryan O'Reilly, he is viewed as someone who's so valuable to this organization. And on and off the ice. I mean, he's part of the leadership group, and he's one of the serial winners that Barry Trotz talks about. He's captained a team to the Stanley Cup in St. Louis. And so I think that Barry Trotz is a big culture guy, and Ryan O'Reilly is one of the guys that he looks at to really build and drive that culture forward. So in talking to Barry Trotz, he had said that, look, O'Reilly doesn't have movement protection on his contract, but we are treating him as if he does. So he is not going anywhere unless he signs off on it. Like we are giving him that courtesy. And sort of, on top of that, I think, they could look at, like, let's say hypothetically that New Jersey had come and said, hey, we'll give you Dawson Mercer and, all these other pieces. Then I think that's when Barry Trotz could go to Ryan O'Reilly and be like, dude, we got to make this deal. Like, it's got to happen. So I think that it's, he's someone that's viewed as very important to this team and this organization. But I think that, at the end of the day, he wasn't going anywhere unless he wanted to. And quite frankly, I don't think anyone would have blamed him if he did want to go somewhere else after the season that the Predators did have. But he, at least in my conversations with him, seems, like he genuinely believes in this team in Nashville and what they can do. And that was ultimately why he decided to stay.
Okay, my second question is, Erik Haula, this is going to be his second tenure with the Predators. How did the first tenure go? Like, what were you around when he was in Nashville?
Funny enough, I wasn't, not yet. I started covering Nashville in 2022, so we just missed each other. However, before I was in Nashville, I was in Carolina covering the Hurricanes. So I did get his brief tenure there.
Well,
And
let me just say, that's not a good Not a good reference, just because it doesn't seem like he and Carolina, excuse me. It
No,
seems like that relationship is broken. Like there's
that
no
was
repairing it.
yeah, that was a very messy breakup. But that being said, I think that, just from he's been around the league a long time, and other in conversations that I've had with other players, he's definitely I would say his personality is maybe kind of an acquired taste. Not necessarily that he's, a huge personality, or he's, like hard to get along with per se, but I just think that that he can come off as maybe a little rough around the edges sometimes, and that's not objectively a bad thing. I just think it's worth noting. Nashville did just add a player sort of similar in that regard in Jonathan Marchessault last season, and that's kind of out of character for Nashville. They a lot of their their core pieces have been sort of and I don't mean this unkindly, but sort of vanilla in terms of their personalities. I mean, like Roman Yossi, Philip Forsberg, big, like, don't rock the boat guys, and they're just kind of, they say the party line, and they don't really, stir up any drama. And I think that, then you go and you get guys like Jonathan Marchessault, Michael Bunting, now Erik Haula. It's like, oh, okay, we're adding a little sandpaper into the mix here, which I think on the ice is a good thing. Off the ice, as a media member, I love it because it's content for days. But I think that, I'm just a little curious as to how this is going to go. Because, back to your original question, the team that was here in Nashville the last time Haula was here looks very different now. So I guess I'm a little unsure of how that's going to go.
So let me tell you something about Erik Haula. Like I said earlier in the show, of all the people I've interviewed, he's one of my favorites to interact with. It can sometimes be a little intimidating because that those big blue eyes, that intense, like that anger sometimes. Yeah, he can be a little rough around the edges, but he just tells it how it is, and that's the same phrasing that Christy Flannery told me when she was on this show a few years ago when Haula was in his first season with the Devils. The thing about Erik Haula is, like, here's what I noticed in the locker room. He is beloved by his teammates, or was beloved by his teammates. Jonathan Kovacevic even said that Haula was one of the top 3 personalities. I hear Erik like chirping his teammates in a friendly way. I hear him laughing, yelling, just being a goofball. And you don't really, I'm sure a lot of people don't see that, but that's what I see in Erik Haula. That's what I noticed when I stepped foot in the locker room. He's meant a lot to the organization, to his teammates. And I had the chance to speak with Allison Nason, the wife of Stefan Nason. And Allison talked about how his wife was sort of like bringing everyone together, doing all this planning, all things like that. So I think Erik Haula is misunderstood, if you ask me. Now, he has gotten snippy with me before. I remember he kind of came at me a little bit in Los Angeles. He's come at a few other people, but the sentiment doesn't change. And in fact, I got a clip that I want to play you, and hopefully this could help you have a different perspective. So this was from Exit Interviews 2023. Erik Haula was set to become a free agent, and Jack Hughes talked about Erik and what he brought to the organization. I want you to take a listen.
I'm a huge Erik Haula fan. He came in and he did a great job for us, providing like that leadership and, experience. But, there's a difference between being in the locker room and being a voice and then not backing it up. And, he's a guy that's been a gamer for us and pretty much played all the games all year. And, he's fighting, he's scoring, he's penalty killing, he's power play. So he's just a character guy, and, he fit really well in our locker room, and, that's a guy we should bring back for sure.
So after hearing what Jack had to say, does your opinion change in a sense? I know I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, but does that sort of give you an idea as to how Erik is in the locker room behind the scenes?
It does. And, again, I bring the Jonathan Marchessault comparison back again, not necessarily in the way that they play on the ice, but the personality type. I don't think objectively it's a bad thing. I actually think it's good that they have, to have someone who isn't afraid to tell it like it is. My co-host Ann at Locked On Predators, we always say about Jonathan Marchessault, he just says the things. He just says all of the things. And I think it's good to have someone like that. And it sounds like Haula is the same way. I think what maybe concerns me, and again, this isn't a problem objectively with Haula himself. I just think it's about, the situation he's walking into in Nashville. One of the biggest problems that the Predators had this last year, and Barry Trotz acknowledged it, the players acknowledged it too, is there was sort of this, so much changed where, they didn't just bring in new pieces. They brought in Steven Stamkos and Jonathan Marchessault and Brady Shea in a locker room where you already have Roman Josi and Philip Forsberg, Ryan O'Reilly, and et cetera. And I think that it got to a point where there was almost this leadership paralysis, where it was almost like no one wanted to step on anyone else's toes. And so that, I think, sort of created this void, this opening for whoever was going to be the loudest voice or the biggest voice to kind of just be the voice in the room. That ended up being Jonathan Marchessault. And while Jonathan Marchessault does a lot of things really well, I don't know that he's the voice that everyone needs to be listening to. Kind of similar with Erik Haula. I think of him as more of a lead by example kind of guy than a lead with your words sort of guy. And so I'm just a little curious as to, like, are we just creating more of this leadership paralysis by bringing more veteran voices into the room? I mean, I didn't even mention, Luke Schenn, Gus Nyquist, those guys are now gone, but those were also part of that group that was already there in Nashville, at the beginning of the season. And so I think that it just seems like there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen right now in Nashville. And as far as leadership roles go, and of course, Haula, not expected to be part of the formal leadership group there, but I still think that as a veteran voice, he's going to be one that people look to. And so I think that there just needs to be more of a clear delineation of roles and voices. So it's not just like whoever's loudest is the one that everybody falls in line with. So again, I don't think that there's objectively anything wrong with the way that Haula, carries himself. I just think that there needs to be a balance. And that is obviously, it's not under his control. It's under the rest of the team's control. And, I think it'll take a lot of introspection and just, conversation within the locker room of like, okay, we know, I mean, Haula wasn't here for it, but the rest of us know how awful last season was. We do not want to repeat that. And so we got to make sure that we get, we're all pulling on the same rope here.
Absolutely. And he does have a past history with Andrew Burnett because when Lindy Ruff was the head coach, Andrew Burnett was the right-hand man to Lindy during the 2022-2023 season. Haula has only missed the playoffs twice in his career and he's been in the league for quite some time. The first time he missed it was due to injury when he was with the Golden Knights. The second time was last year with the Devils, when the Devils just outright missed the playoffs, 2023, 2024. Only time will tell to see how Haula meshes with Nashville, but it was a move that the Devils had to make. It sucks, and that's how the business of this works. So I know I guess the Predators end up getting the bigger name player in Erik Haula in this sort of deal. Devils got a 4th round pick and Jeremy Hanzel from the Atlanta Gladiators. So I was actually in the ECHL with the Florida Everblades as a broadcasting intern. And the Gladiators are one of the rivals to the Everblades. So I did have the chance to watch Hanzel up close and personal. Here's what I'm going to say, Devils fans. That's going to be a career AHL player for the most part, career minor leaguer. This is a salary dump. Hanzel, this past season with the Gladiators, 61 games played, 3 goals, 19 assists for a grand total of 22 points, spent 28 minutes in the penalty box. I'm not really expecting much from Hanzel. It doesn't seem like you said earlier in the show, he has a clear path to the NHL, but we get it. That's part of the deal of making a salary dump, and fans want Tom Fitzgerald to actually do something with the team. They want Fitzy to swing for the fences. I'm no exception. And I said Erik Haula a few weeks ago might be on borrowed time. Emma, before we close out today's show, can you give me anything on Jeremy? Anything positive? I know I'm putting you on the spot here, but just anything to write home about?
I mean, he honestly hasn't been in the organization all that long. With Nashville, he was part of the trade from Colorado, came over in the trade for Yakov Trenin at the deadline, not this past season, but the season before. So really, I haven't had a ton of time to watch him myself. I mean, I know that scouts were high on him, I think, like younger in his career, but he has sort of stalled out a little bit, I would say. Interesting to see what he'll do at the AHL level, but yeah, I'm not sure I would expect this to be a big impact guy in the NHL for you.
Yeah, I think the bigger asset here is that 4th round pick, because you never know who the Devils might select with that pick in a few weeks. And I better break the news right now while I can. I will be in Los Angeles in attendance for the draft. So for any Devils fans who happen to be there, don't be afraid to come up and say hi. Here's a quick scouting report on Hanzel. When Hanzel has the puck, good luck figuring out what's coming next. He fakes passes to shoot, fakes shots to pass, and constantly throws out different handling feints to confuse defenders. Even as pressure leans on him, he keeps up the deceptive act to escape with the puck. Then he uses the inside, sets up the entries with 2 line passes through opponents, and constantly activates. Once again, career minor leaguer. Erik Haula's contract off the books. I think that's what everybody cares about. Emma, we talked all things about Erik Haula and this trade that came out of nowhere. I thought the Devils and Predators would take a few days off, but where can my audience find you at?
You can find me over at the Locked On Predators podcast with my co-host Ann Kimmel. You can also find me on social media at Emma_Lingan. And as Trey mentioned, you can find my work online at the Hockey News.
And Predators fans, you can find me at TreyMatt4, Locked On Devils, wherever you get your podcast from. Both available on YouTube and streaming platforms. Emma, thank you for taking the time to do this. We kind of did this spur of the moment because, like I said, I was just eating dinner and then this trade broke out. But like I do to close out every episode, continue to stay safe. Have a wonderful day. Go Devils, go Predators. I will catch you in the next episode of Locked On Devils. Emma will catch you in the next episode of Locked On Predators. Thanks for listening once again.